Today, when food prices rise, we argue online and swipe our cards a little more carefully. In 1900, when prices rose in America's cities, families skipped meals and depended on the quiet mercy of someone behind a wooden counter. In the spring of 1900, on the Lower East Side of New York City, a store manager named Samuel Rosen unlocked the door to a narrow grocery shop before sunrise. The street outside was already stirring. Pushcart vendors rattling into position, children darting between horses and wagons, the air thick with coal smoke and the smell of fresh bread from nearby bakeries. The neighborhood was one of the most densely populated places in America. Tenement buildings towered overhead, their windows crowded with laundry lines and tired faces. Samuel was 38 years old, the son of immigrants who had arrived through Ellis Island only a decade earlier. By 1900, millions had passed through that gateway, transforming New York into a mosaic of languages and traditions. Italians, Jews from Eastern Europe, Irish laborers, and Germans lived side by side in cramped apartments. According to the 1900 U.S. Census, New York City's population had surpassed 3.4 million, making it one of the largest cities in the world. Yet prosperity was uneven. For every industrial magnate rising in a Fifth Avenue mansion, there were dozens of families crowding into two-room flats without proper ventilation or plumbing. Samuel managed a modest grocery owned by a wholesale distributor based near the Hudson River docks. The shop sold flour in burlap sacks, beans by the pound, smoked herring, pickles in brine barrels, potatoes stacked in wooden crates, and sugar measured carefully on a brass scale. There were no plastic wrappers, no barcodes, no refrigeration units in the background. Perishable goods were kept cool with blocks of ice, delivered daily by horse-drawn cart. Food insecurity was a daily reality in the neighborhood. Wages for factory workers, especially women and children employed in garment sweatshops, were painfully low. The average laborer might earn $1.50 to $2 a day, often working 10 to 12 hours in stifling conditions. Rent consumed a large portion of that income. When work slowed or illness struck, hunger followed quickly. Samuel had learned the arithmetic of survival early in life. As a boy, he had watched his mother stretch a pot of soup to feed 6 people. He knew the shame that flickered in a parent's eyes when asking for credit at a store. So when he became manager in 1898, he quietly began keeping a second ledger beneath the main one. The official ledger recorded sales, profits, and deliveries. The hidden one recorded credit extended to families who could not pay. He did not give food away recklessly. He understood the narrow margins of the business. Wholesale prices fluctuated with rail shipments and harvest yields. The Spanish-American War of 1898 had disrupted certain supply lines. But Samuel believed that a store did not exist only to sell, it existed to sustain a community. Each morning he adjusted prices as carefully as a jeweler handling diamonds. If a barrel of flour arrived at a lower cost due to a surplus harvest in the Midwest, he passed the savings directly to customers instead of pocketing the difference. When potatoes were abundant from upstate farms, he promoted them as a filling, affordable staple. He created simple meal suggestions: bean stew with onions and carrots, bread thickened with drippings for flavor, oatmeal sweetened lightly with molasses instead of costly refined sugar. News of his fairness spread quietly. Mothers began sending children with small coins wrapped in cloth. Dock workers stopped by before dawn shifts to buy discounted bread he set aside from the previous day. He arranged with a nearby bakery to purchase unsold loaves at a fraction of the cost just before closing time, then offered them cheaply rather than letting them go stale. In 1901, when a heat wave struck the city, food spoilage became a serious threat. Without electric refrigeration, milk soured quickly. Infant mortality rates in crowded neighborhoods were tragically high, often linked to contaminated milk. Samuel partnered with a local charitable society inspired by the settlement movement, similar in spirit to the work being done at Hull House in Chicago, to distribute cleaner, safer milk at reduced prices. He sacrificed part of the store's weekly profit to ensure mothers could purchase it. That same year, a dock strike slowed shipments of produce into the city. Prices spiked overnight. Other shops raised prices sharply to protect their margins. Samuel raised his too, but only enough to cover the increased cost. When customers accused him of profiteering, he opened his invoice book and showed them the numbers. Transparency built trust in a time when corporations were often seen as distant and ruthless. Urban reformers were beginning to expose the harsh realities of tenement life. Photographs by social reformers captured overcrowded rooms and dim stairwells. Public awareness was growing, leading eventually to housing reforms and sanitation laws. But change moved slowly. In the meantime, survival depended on everyday decisions made by ordinary people. One cold December evening in 1902, a widow named Mrs. Donnelly entered the store with two small children. Her husband had died in a factory accident weeks earlier. She had pawned her wedding ring to pay rent. She placed a few pennies on the counter and asked for whatever they would buy. Samuel measured out beans, added an onion, and slipped a small bag of rice into her parcel without charge. He wrote the cost in his hidden ledger under a simple note, "To be repaid in time." She wept quietly, not from humiliation, but from relief. By 1903, competition intensified as larger chain groceries began appearing in wealthier districts. These early corporate stores benefited from bulk purchasing and standardized pricing. Some predicted that small neighborhood shops would disappear. Samuel studied their methods carefully. He adopted efficiency where possible, organizing shelves more strategically, reducing waste, negotiating better rates with suppliers, while preserving the human connection they lacked. He also introduced a community barrel near the door. Customers who were able could drop in a handful of beans or a few coins. At the end of each week, the contents were redistributed to families in need. There was no public accounting of who gave or who received. Dignity was protected on both sides. In 1905, during an economic downturn that left many laborers temporarily unemployed, the store's profits fell sharply. The owner warned Samuel to tighten credit or risk closure. Samuel complied outwardly, reducing extended credit in the official ledger. Yet he quietly used part of his modest salary to cover gaps. His wife questioned the wisdom of risking their own security. He answered simply, "If we close our doors to them now, what kind of doors are we keeping open?" The panic of 1907 tested that philosophy further. Banks failed. Fear rippled through financial markets. Even in neighborhoods far from Wall Street, the effects were immediate. Customers arrived with fewer coins. Some could not pay at all. Samuel negotiated delayed payments with suppliers and reduced his own household expenses. He limited meat orders, emphasizing cheaper protein sources like dried peas and lentils. Malnutrition did not vanish, but it eased. Historians often measure the early 20th century by industrial growth, skyscrapers, and political reforms. Yet beneath those grand narratives were smaller, quieter revolutions of compassion. Samuel's store never made headlines. It did not attract investors or appear in national reports, but it became an anchor in its block, a place where hunger was met not with indifference, but with ingenuity. By 1910, the neighborhood had begun to change. New regulations improved sanitation. Public health campaigns reduced some disease rates. Wages slowly rose in certain industries. Electric lights became more common in shops. Samuel eventually installed a small mechanical refrigerator, marveling at its steady hum. Technology was advancing, but he never allowed efficiency to replace empathy. One afternoon, a young boy who had once carried pennies to his counter returned as a delivery driver for a wholesale company. He shook Samuel's hand and said, "My mother says we ate because of you." The boy's family had repaid every cent in the hidden ledger years earlier, but the gratitude lingered. When Samuel retired in 1915, he handed the business to his nephew. The hidden ledger, worn and fragile, remained tucked beneath the main one. On its final page, Samuel had written a simple line: "Profit is measured in people fed." Today, cities debate food deserts, rising grocery costs, and corporate consolidation. Apps deliver meals in minutes. Refrigeration spans continents. Yet the core question remains the same as it was in 1900. Who ensures that the poorest neighbor can still eat? In the crowded streets of old New York, long before supermarkets and digital payments, a store manager answered that question with scales, sacks of flour, and a conscience stronger than the pressures of profit. His story reminds us that history is not shaped only by presidents or tycoons, but by ordinary citizens who decide day after day that fairness matters more than fortune, and that sometimes the most radical act in a city of millions is simply to keep food affordable for those who need it most.